This actually leads to my last question, and it's a concept I've actually seen that you walk through in person. I'm in Nashville, as you said, and it's funny because there's a lot of articles out there. It's talking about kids from the Northeast who are, oh, I'm not applying to Ivy League. I'm applying to Vandy as my safety school. I'm like, do you have any idea how hard it is to get into Vanderbilt? Like, think that's a safety school, right? But I've seen you or talk about like, hey, you want to go to this school. Maybe you get in, but if you don't, have you thought about that school? So I want you to give me some examples of, hey, I might have, it doesn't have to be Harvard, right? But like, I have someone who wants to go to Harvard. Maybe they get in, but if they don't, or they get in, but they don't get any aid, there's a school like this that I want to introduce them to. Can you give me some examples of that?
Yeah, so it's just so funny with Vanderbilt, and one of the misconceptions that families have going through this process is a lot of parents will sort of think that, hey, college and admissions and financial aid works just like when they went through the process 20, 30 years ago, right? They might not always say that, but you can tell in your conversations with them, oh, no, no. So Vandy's easy to get into, or some of the schools here in New England that used to be more like commuter schools, very easy to get to, now have Ivy League acceptance rates, right? So if you look at like engineering schools, Georgia Tech, MIT, obviously, Carnegie Mellon, right? Those are excellent, excellent universities. But a great alternative, for example, and a much less expensive alternative, and still has phenomenal programs, is University of Alabama at Huntsville. It's a public institution. Huntsville is also the home to, I think, the
I went,
Space Force,
I
or
went to
like big
college in
like rates.
Huntsville.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's a phenomenal school with a phenomenal engineering program, right? But it costs a fraction of what Carnegie Mellon and Georgia Tech might cost. If you're looking for example for, let's say, like a business school or something, right? Because you want to major in business. I'm actually a big fan of some liberal arts schools for that. Ohio Wesleyan is great. Syracuse is great. University of Dayton in Ohio. I love them because they're fairly generous with aid, but more importantly, they're big believers in experiential learning opportunities. In fact, I believe it's Ohio Wesleyan. You have to do an internship, but let's say you intern, let's say for a nonprofit, right? So the nonprofit can't pay you. The school has a fund where if you do that internship, the school will just pay you, right? Because they want you to do it, right? Syracuse does that with their business school, honors college. University of Dayton has a work component also. And so there's lots of these examples that are great schools throughout the country that give you great education, but the cost can be a lot less. And in fact, actually, even for engineering, most people think, well, like, oh, I'm going to go to engineering school, but you can go to a liberal arts school that has an engineering program. And because liberal arts schools aren't, right, stereotypically known for engineering, all things being equal, you might get more aid. Now, it's not just about majors. Some public schools really want out-of-state students. So up in my area, for example, University of Maine loves out-of-state students. Right now, the SUNY system, which is the State University of New York, they're basically matching in-state tuition with some of like the New England states. So as an out-of-stater, you can go to a New York school for no more than your in-state tuition. But other state schools really don't want out-of-staters because they have enough in-state. Virginia, North Carolina, Florida, Texas, and California are good examples of that, right? So you might get in, but you're not going to get in from them because, again, they don't need you. But then even also like gender. So one of the examples that I will talk about is Rochester Institute of Technology in Rochester, New York. So they're a STEM school, right? It's in the name, Rochester Institute of Technology. It's a beautiful school, beautiful campus. But they have phenomenal business programs. But because it's an engineering school, it's like 70% male, and like almost all of them are in engineering. So if you have a student who's a girl and maybe wants to study business or like visual, like graphic design, and you apply to RIT, you're going to get a lot more aid because the school's working hard to balance out the majors and balance out the gender ratio, right? So that's an example of, instead of trying to like fight your way into a like a University of Chicago business school, which is phenomenal, or Northwestern, or like a Boston University or Vanderbilt for business school, you can go to RIT for a fraction of the cost, and they really want you. And just so, by the way, this shows up in the award letters, right? So if you look at some of these top tier schools, and I just happen to know Boston University off the top of my head, but every year their freshman class, roughly half of their freshman class pays full sticker price of like $95,000, right? So those kids got in, but they did not get aid, right? Now there's different reasons of why they might have chosen that, but a lot of these top schools, because they don't really need sort of the average applicant, they're like, okay, we'll let you in, but we're not going to give you aid. The family has to decide, is it worth the money? Are you really into that prestige of saying that your kid goes to an Ivy League or Vanderbilt or whatever? Or is it really like you want a good or great college experience, but you just need to pay a lot less for it, right? And the family has to figure that out.